I pay respect to the Bhikkhu Sangha and Bhikkhuni Sangha. Thank you for allowing me to speak on Venerable Sanghamitta and her mission. I would like to focus on her role as Dhammaduta. Allow me to take you back to the year 2001 when I was ordained in Sri Lanka. Venerable Dhammaloka, the late Venerable Dhammaloka, who was actually organizing for my ordination, he was the abbot of the Pothan Ramaya. And at the ordination time, that was seminary ordination, I was still wearing white, and he asked me to go out and hoist the flag. I was confused, I didn't know that ordination has anything to do with hoisting the flag. There were 3 flags: Thai flag, Sri Lankan flag, and the Buddhist flag. There was another senior master Bhikkhu who also hoisted the Buddhist flag, and I was supposed to hoist the Thai flag. Then after finishing with the hoisting of the flags, with the 3 flags, I came back to the ordination hall, and Venerable Dhammaloka explained to me that it was like Venerable Sanghamitta, when she took the lineage, the Bhikkhuni lineage from India to Sri Lanka. So when I receive ordination, I myself receive ordination in Sri Lanka. I am taking the lineage back to Thailand. So that's why he asked me to hoist the flag symbolically, to say that now I'm taking the lineage back to Thailand, the lineage that Venerable Sanghamitta actually delivered to the Sri Lankan people way back, in the 3rd century BC. That was the first time that I became, very interested in Venerable Sanghamitta, to realize that actually she is the first Bhikkhuni to play the role of international Dhammaduta, taking the lineage of the Bhikkhuni ordination from India to Sri Lanka. Allow me to take you back to 3rd century BC. That was a time when King Ashoka, at that time he was not yet a Buddhist, he was invading Kalinga. And of course he won the war, but after this Kalinga war, King Ashoka became very remorseful. He recorded himself that there were something like 400,000 people who died in this war. And on top of that, at that time when he invaded this Kalinga, there was no king. So you can imagine that King Ashoka, being a great king himself, invaded a state with no king. So there was no pride in that winning the war, He was very remorseful, and it was that time that he considered turning towards Buddhism. Approaching Buddhist monks, the Buddhist monks suggested that for him to be very closely rooted in Buddhism, he should take ordination, which was not possible for him at that time. So, he turned around and he asked his children, the most immediate children, the oldest one that he had, was through his first marriage. He was married to this Princess Videhi, or Videsa. 2 children were born, the Princess Mahinda and Princess Sanghamitta. At the time when King Ashoka asked his children to be ordained on his behalf, Prince Mahinda was 20 and Princess Sanghamitta was 19. She was 1 year younger than her brother. Imagine that they were so obedient, and both of them were ordained. It was recorded that Venerable Sanghamitta was not ordained as Bhikkhuni yet, because she was not of age, until the next year, the following year, that she could take the full ordination to become Bhikkhuni. At that time, we thought that she's just a young princess, but not until later that we realized that she was married. Yes, so then after that, King Ashoka had this mission of sending out Dhammaduta, the Buddhist ambassador, to spread the words of the Buddha in 9 different routes. And he chose to send Venerable Mahinda, his own son, to Sri Lanka. At that time, it was recorded that Venerable Prince Mahinda was 12 vasas, which means that he must be 32 years old because he was ordained as a bhikkhu when he was 20. Now this group of Buddhist ambassador led by Most Venerable Prince Mahinda, he himself, 3 monks, 3 more monks, and 1 layman. This 1 layman, this Upasaka, was supposed to take care of the Bhikkhu Sangha when they were traveling, and 1 Samanera. This 1 Samanera was a nephew of Venerable Prince Mahinda, which means that he actually was the son of Princess Sanghamitta. So you imagine that when King Ashoka asked his children to be ordained, Princess Sanghamitta was already married. She also had a son, and this son became also ordained as Samanera, and he was in the group, in the very first batch of Bhikkhu Sangha to travel with Venerable Mahinda to spread the words of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. So very interestingly, when Venerable Prince Mahinda realized that he was going to go to Sri Lanka, far away from his own homeland, he went to pay respect to his mother. His mother, Videsa, Princess Videsa, did not become queen. She did not come to the capital to become queen of King Ashoka, but she insisted to remain in her own province. So Venerable Mahinda came to Sanji, which is very close to where his mother was living, and here the princess mother actually built a stupa to honor Prince Mahinda before his departure to Sri Lanka. And I'm sure that Prince Mahinda himself was the one who oversee this the building of the stupa. It took about a year or so, and Sanchi Stupa, the one that we see now, very popular, Sanchi Stupa, is the one that was built for Venerable Prince Mahinda. It was sponsored by Princess, his mother. And archaeologically, you will not be surprised that all of the stupas in Sri Lanka take after this Sanji structure. Yes, so this connection is very important. Venerable Mahinda and the group they landed in Anuradhapura, and he gave a sermon to King Tissa. King Tissa was the king of Sri Lanka at that time. That was his first sermon, and from that sermon, he was able to convert King Tissa to become a Buddhist. The second sermon, Venerable Mahinda was invited to the capital, to Anuradhapura, and that's where he gave the second sermon. And among the audience, the Princess Anula became Sotapanna. So she is the first one on this whole island who actually became Sotapanna, and it's a woman. So Prince Anula, after having attained Sotapanna stage, she approached King Tissa to ask for ordination. She would like to lead her life just like Venerable Mahinda. Venerable Mahinda said that he came only with a Bhikkhu Sangha, but he could arrange for the Princess Anula to have the ordination by sending the Samanera. You remember Samanera who came with Venerable Mahinda, Samanera Sumana, who was also Princess Sanghamitta's son. So it was Samanera Sumana who actually flew back to India. That was how it was recorded in the chronicle. He flew back to India, and he approached King Ashoka, his grandfather, that Venerable Mahinda now invited Venerable Sanghamitta to come to Sri Lanka to help him propagate Buddhism, to help him establish the lineage of the Bhikkhuni Sangha in Sri Lanka. So this is very important connection. King Ashoka was very, how to say, he was very wise. He was considering that Sri Lankan people worship trees. So that's why he sent along with Venerable Sanghamitta the Bodhi sapling, so that the Sri Lankan people can pay respect not only to any ordinary tree but to the Bodhi tree, which symbolizes Buddhism. Venerable Sanghamitta traveled by sea route. She did not fly. Not that she didn't have the miraculous power, but she didn't fly. As it was recorded, the King Ashoka came to see her off, at the port where the ship would be taking her down south to Sri Lanka. It took her almost a year to travel from India to Sri Lanka. Along with her, there were 10 bhikkhunis. Now I have to give you the name. This list of name of 10 bhikkhunis who traveled along with her, we have to look for reference. My reference is Dipavamsa. Dipavamsa is the oldest chronicle, Sri Lankan chronicle, written sometime in the 4th century AD. Mahavamsa, which is much more popular, was written in the 5th century AD, about 100 years after. But Mahavamsa was not written, did not derive the information from Dipavamsa. Apparently, both of these chronicles have shared the common information, Purana, the ancient sayings, so to say. So in this, in Dipavamsa, in chapter 15, it gives the list of names of 10 bhikkhunis. But in chapter 18, also give list of name of 10 bhikkhunis, but they do not match completely. So in chapter 18, this is what I have, the bhikkhunis who travel along with her: Venerable Uttra, Hema, Pasatapala, Akimitta, Thasika, Pekhu, Pappata, Matta, Malla, and Dhammatasiya. Now in chapter 15 of the same chronicle, more or less the same names were repeated again, but among these 10, 3 names differ from the list given in chapter 18. We have Tappa, we have Masakala, we have Papatachina. Maybe this shift of the name may be depending on, sometimes they refer to the place where that person is from. So this shows, what happened is that this shows that the person who record chapter 15 and the person who actually record chapter 18 would be different people. But the academics believe that this Dipavamsa was actually written by the bhikkhunis, whereas Mahavamsa was written by the monks, and Mahavamsa was sponsored by the kings. So very long, Mahavamsa is very long, about 1,000 pages, whereas Dipavamsa is very short one with only 20 plus chapters. But Dipavamsa give many details referring to the bhikkhunis. Now, Venerable Mahinda and Venerable Sanghamitta, both brother and sisters, they continued their work in spreading the teaching of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, in this whole island, and they also were very careful to establish the Bhikkhu Sangha and the Bhikkhuni Sangha. Both brother and sisters were supportive, and we could say that during their lifetime, they really saw to it that Buddhism was truly established in the land. In Dipavamsa, it was recorded that there were, at that time, the women who became ordained were from high family. There were princes, there were queens, there were daughters of the Mukhamantri, like ministers, daughters of the ministers. And it was also recorded, which I thought is very important, that there were older bhikkhunis, there were middle-aged bhikkhunis, and there were younger generation bhikkhunis, which means that there was clear continuation of the Bhikkhuni Sangha that would continue on on this small island. Venerable Mahinda lived up to 80 years old, and the brother and sister, they are only 1 year apart. And it was recorded also that Venerable Sanghamitta died the following year. So she also died, passed away at the age of 80. I had an opportunity to see a stupa in Anuradhapura, which was dedicated to Venerable Sanghamitta. It's not big. I would say it's about only 3 meters by a diameter, still in Anuradhapura. And the local guide can actually show us, which one is believed. People believe that this one is the stupa that was dedicated to Venerable Sanghamitta. So for our lineage, for the Bhikkhuni lineage, we have to be very thankful to Venerable Sanghamitta. Imagine that she had to leave her family at very early age. At the age of 19, she became ordained as a Samaneri. At that time, she already had a son, which we didn't know. We discovered only later on that the Samanera Sumana was actually her son, and he was a connecting person also. We did not talk much about Samanera Sumana, but he was a connecting person, flying back and forth, to eventually bring his own mother to join his uncle in propagating Buddhism in this small island of Sri Lanka, which is like a small pearl, in the southern part of Indian peninsula. The spread of the lineage, the Bhikkhu lineage and the Bhikkhuni lineage from the 3rd century BC, that is the time of King Ashoka, through his children, is very, very important. And Sri Lanka is the first country to actually take the lineage of the Bhikkhuni ordination, Bhikkhuni Sangha, to yet another country outside India. So Sri Lanka has that, has that history, a very, very important history of making this connection between India and Sri Lanka. And we from Southeast Asia, there is a strong connection between Sri Lanka and Thailand and other countries. When Thailand started as a nation, as the first unified nation, some 700 years back in 13th century AD, we received the lineage, the Bhikkhu lineage from Sri Lanka. That's why the Thai monks are called the Lanka Vangsa. And when the Sri Lankan monk, when they lost the lineage, they revived by taking the lineage from Thailand. So that's why you have Siam Vangsa in Sri Lanka. And as I'm sitting here as a Bhikkhuni, I take the lineage from Siam Vangsa from Sri Lanka. So that's all can be rooted, traced back to Venerable Sanghamitta. So today, particularly, we are celebrating, remembering how great Venerable Sanghamitta was, how much she sacrificed to have this Buddhism rooted not only in India but also in Sri Lanka. And she was the very, very first Bhikkhuni who traveled outside her homeland to establish Buddhism in Sri Lanka, and taking with her the Bhikkhuni lineage. And we are the one who are now the branches, the flowers of what she laid down for us way back so many thousands of years ago. So today we pay respect to her, and today we try to do our best. And whatever the good action that we have been doing, all the kusala karma that we have been doing, we would like to dedicate to Venerable Sanghamitta to pay respect to her. Sadhu.